Honestly, I'm surprised I didn't discover this sooner in life. When I was younger, I was always told that I had a vast imagination. And I think the reason for that is I find a real comfort in visual media like that. There's a sense of admiration and understanding. Probably because I've watched so many shows and movies over and over again. That's probably the reason why I am able to remember them so vividly in my head and able to quote them. This imagination that people said I had, they kept going on about, that I should put it to the best use possible. And initially I thought that was actually being an actor, but as I went further and further into that, I discovered that that is actually a much more harder task to, get into the acting profession and finding roles.
Just be yourself. That's all you need to do.
And I think this was actually in my college years, early college years actually, that if I can't get myself in these roles that I want, then maybe I should write the roles that I want and perform them. And so I took my first creative media class in college, and from there I realised that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to become a filmmaker.
Well, hello there.
And I actually think that that's more mature, to be fair. Like, you go in for one thing and then you come out with something else. I mean, I do think that, this, connection and fascination, admiration and all that jazz related to movies and television shows and visual media. I think, every filmmaker thinks that to an extent. But I also think that it's something else when, like I said, you go in for one thing and come out with another. And that sense of, that realization, it's very rewarding, isn't it? The Survivor was not just my first short film I ever made, but it was the first time I ever made anything as a filmmaker, period. It was made way back in 2014 when I first got into filmmaking and studied filmmaking. And it was actually the very first time that I took on the role as a director. And I was well jacked for it, even wearing some sort of stupid hat and doing my very best Joss Whedon impression. And yeah, it's not good. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, in comparison, I think that's just a result of me getting better over time. But yeah, we tried to create a post-apocalyptic short using a very contemporary, brand new environment. And even though there was some construction areas, it was good enough in the moment, but it can't stand the test of time as the greatest post-apocalyptic films ever. Even in one shot where there's a chase sequence going on between the two characters, you can see a woman walking in the background, and it's not without its praise, because it actually has been influential. A friend of mine who helped me out with another short film back in 2018 actually watched it, and he quite liked it and asked me, can I actually remake this? And well, I don't know where he is with that at the moment, but I think it does show that a start is a start, and that should never go without recognition. The Buba Railway advert was not the first thing I made as a filmmaker, though it was the first thing that was uploaded to TFL Creative Media's YouTube channel, and it was the first time that I can definitively say that I was proud and successful with a film that was made completely off my own bat. It came about as a result of a task that we had to do in creative media back in college, where everyone was tasked to make a horror short film. but as someone who really does despise the horror genre, I campaigned to make this advert instead because it tailors to my own strengths in terms of the interest, the subject matter. I think because of that reason, it turned out quite well. It was over 2 days filming on separate weeks. It was completely led by me, the filming, the research, the editing, and if that advert failed in areas like just little technical things, then that really doesn't matter because it got me my first distinction at college, and that is something that nobody could ever take away from me. The Mega Marksman and the Pink Count teaser trailers were also made in my college years, but they were also made at a time where I was coming up with ideas for superhero comics and superhero characters. The Mega Marksman and the Pink Hound were 2 of those ideas for superhero characters. And the idea of these teaser trailers was to see if they can conceptually work. Not necessarily in live action, but to see if them as a concept could work. It's nice to know that even today, which at the time were the best things I have ever made, but nowadays, it's still good to see that these are still worthy examples to demonstrate to people that I can edit, film, and just in general make trailers for people. It's very good for my showcase in that regard. But looking back, yeah, they were just a bit of fun with some friends, really. I mean, and that's really how they should be remembered. A little bit of fun at a time where I was really starting to get into it and have a lot of fun with it. The Mountain Moments promo video was the first time I'd made something for promotion material or commercial material. It was made for my mum and dad's ski resort chalet business that we owned at the time, called Mountain Moments. Had to go up onto various locations, but had quite a bit of help with that, of getting to places. I'm still quite proud of it because the editing, the cinematography and the music, I think, given that I used a camera which I now use for vlogging, I think it came out really, really well. In fact, my folks were so pleased with it, they were actually in tears. Don't know why, but it was a sign of better things to come, I think. I call Journey with a Toy a animation, but it's not really an animation, not in the conventional sense, because what it was is that it used a technique called pixelation, where you take 1-second snippets of live action and put them together to make it look like a continuous sequence. And that was a technique of this continuous sequence that I learned was a type of animation in my second college. This was made at a time where I transitioned from one college to another, and that was really the start of my filmmaking in terms of learning about where I'm going, how I'm going to go about it, and much, much more. And Journey of the Toy really is the start of that journey, a real transition period. And I think the piece itself also represents that transitional period as well, because it's all about, somebody, playing with a toy over time as a kid, then how it's neglected, and then it goes on to being sold and then find its way into a new home. And I wouldn't say it's the best thing I've made. I mean, it's kind of deceitful in terms of, it being an animation, but I do like what it represented at the time. I'm only going to touch on Melancholy briefly, because that film really only came about by chance. The shots were basically filmed for a task at college where we had to experiment with different camera angles and different lighting. At least that's what I recall it was. And the shots that were taken by Joel Tucker, I saw there was potential in them, and I thought that you could create something out of this. So I set it to some nice music, and it did have some meaning. I think it was about reflection, really. It's not like it was the worst thing I ever made, but Melancholy just kind of, well, exists. The fan films. Thought to talk about both of them here because, well, they're both fan films, they were both made around the same time, and they were both made for the same sort of purpose, in a way. And that purpose was for college. No surprise there. The task was to make a fan film that revolved around or was based on a film that we liked. We divided off into groups, and Harry Walters, Joel Tucker, Benedict Webb, the Room 18 lot went off and made a fan film based on The Shining, which I actually helped to participate in. But for me, I didn't want to make a fan film based around a film. I wanted to make one based around a television show because I felt that there was more interest, more drive, and more passion in the television world because I prefer television over films. But the teachers were very adamant that it be a film, so I stuck to what I knew best, and that was Marvel, and I made Marvel's Brighton, which was very, very simple. Probably one of the most basic things I've ever made. Just, two teenagers in the world of the MCU living in England and basically giving commentary on some of the big world-ending events that have occurred in the MCU up until that point. Nowadays, I just think, well, what was I thinking then? It's not the best. But I still wanted to make a fan film revolved around a television show. This idea of making fan films really did spark something in me with that. So I decided to make a fan film revolving around one of my favourite television shows, Primeval. And yeah, it was a bit of a stressful shoot. I mean, we wanted to film on one day, but the day was ending quite fast, so we had to cut that day short and then film on a separate day. That's why the weather in some shots doesn't look consistent with other shots. But I am actually quite pleased with this one, to be fair. I felt like that there was more effort and more energy and more forethought put into it because it felt like a continuation of the original show. So yeah, even though that I regretted some of the decisions I made and the ways I treated some of the crew members at the time because I was stressed out on this shoot, I am pleased that this one was made, and I'm pleased it turned out the way it did.